usually beside you, right?
Right.
We are going to have, I think, right down there, but I need to have it. I didn't realize you'd be joining us. So let me do this. I've got a paper here. If you have something, you can print it off or you can write it down. I've got a paper. Give me 1 second. I'll jump on it. DC. First, I want to have you make sure you have the form. Here you go. Actually, Emily has it. Yes, I do. I'm happy to give it to you guys. 1 second. Emily has your name tag. She's right down there. Jeff gave me the call and said you'd be joining. I was a little taken aback, but great. It's actually not that far. Oh, yeah, I was going to say. You are definitely part of the Mahoning Valley, too. Representative Hagan? How you doing? Very well. Are you going to... Yeah, if we get that right here, that'd be great. Thank you. I'm just going to show two more. You're a man as well? This one right here. It's kind of like... Yeah, thank you. I think a couple more individuals will be showing up this morning, so it's been a little crazy everyone showing up last night. Yeah, thank you. your speech.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted you to know I made it.
Yes, I am.
Mike can put it somewhere up here. I think. We really don't know. You guys having fun yet?
Senator Sean O'Brien, thank you
Oh,
very
Sean,
much.
how you doing? No, that's all right.
Yes.
told you. And I hope you're okay with coming up here. I feel bad.
Ready to get it going? Yeah, we're going to get it going.
I'm sorry. Send this over to him.
How many witnesses do we end up having?
I believe 13, maybe 14. Oh, no, no. You only have It's Emily Myers.
C-L-A-R-E.
Yep. That one. That's good.
Cut down on that. Keep my shade. I get that.
Thank you. That's what you're
Here's the deal. I may say it. I may stand on the other side. If you go to the other side, that way we can come to Patrick and ask him. All right, I think we're good there. I'm on the side.
What's up?
I'm fine, man. Good to see you. Hey, how's your son doing? Hey, Ron. Hey, Ron, how's your son doing?
Came home Tuesday.
Okay.
So he'll be home until, well, he's going to go do some traveling. He'll be home till like sometime in April. Then they go back to where he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. You're now just the freshman year?
Yes.
I'll make sure reason to have it, you're not sitting in a position.
Oh, that's great. I want that on film.
Lou, you know where you're going?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Okay. Now we're just about to start. I just wanted to call you and make sure you weren't
I'll
lost.
get the chair up here and the other folder. Yeah, Teresa.
Okay.
Talking to my ranking member.
Gentilly.
Tell him to be gentle on his way here.
Height said, be gentle, but get the phone. Get your ass up here immediately.
Carlos raised just the hair.
Nah. I'll see you, man.
Sweat?
What's going on? Why are you sweating so much?
I got rain on.
No.
Press it. Tell me it's rain. Although I didn't kind of have because I parked way
Far.
Where's this blue?
This is sweet Lou.
I think you're down there in the creek.
Oh, right, because I'm not really parked today.
Oh, please. Was she here? Yes. Oh, okay. Right here. I'm sorry. I tried to get rid of it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I'll remember that next time I see
I
you.
got to dry off.
Thank you guys for being willing to come all this way to do this. And it's obviously a very, very
Yeah, I don't remember.
We got to share.
Katie, are you serious?
It's fun. That's fun. I feel like I should know and I already have my car.
Great coach.
I'm not there yet. Yeah, I know. It's a constant over or undergrad.
guys on us.
Yeah, I am.
Fetter's here.
Used to have candy in his pocket at practice. Give us candy on the field when you're in college, and you never get this way.
Point to order everything that we say can be correct.
Okay, I'm going to let each one of you, if you want to make your comments, especially from the valley, if you want to.
I think he's really liking you, but I want more.
Who's that?
Great, thank you. Very kind. Quarter class day. I was your quarter class day.
Camera.
Nice. That's funny.
I mean,
I'm going to move this back here. Could you wear my blues?
Let's get it on. Come on, Chairman.
Well, hey, you got to go with what you have. You don't have looks. Where are you going, Teresa?
You don't even have a mic.
Okay. I thought it was my Michelle. He's excellent. I have no idea. I saw Sean's 8 and Dave's 8.
Who's your drive down today?
That's what I was on.
Misery and... It's not a problem? You know where I get on 11.
Vince,
Coming out of town, they help climb by Route 40. Wow. Because it's bad. It leaves water on the highway. Oh, yeah. That's somewhat. We don't like him well enough to move for us.
This is just logistically unless you really want the spot, you don't mind moving. Just as a heads up.
Thanks, Mike.
Right there. It was fun. It's a good time. The real thing is the time of travel. Yes. Penny.
Is that wireless?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can.
No, I have some cameras too.
Yeah.
Let me grab it.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. We're going to go ahead and bring the hearing to order here. I'd first like to thank the Mahoning Valley delegation for inviting me as chairman of this bipartisan hearing today. I just want to make sure it's important to know this is not a committee or subcommittee hearing, but is a hearing to gather information and listen to expert testimony before us. Before we begin, I would like to, since we have Representative Hagan, this is your representative district, would you like to make a few opening comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome everyone here, and particularly this committee. I would like to say that, Mr. Chairman, I have spent 40 years on the railroad winding my train through this valley and have witnessed the glowing fires and smokestacks of prosperity. My grandfather worked in the steel mill for 38 years, and his family enjoyed the fruits of his labor provided by the steel companies and the steel industry. And Mr. Chairman, I worked and serviced almost every steel warehouse in Youngstown and had the saddest view as I watched the lights go out on our manufacturing base, lost jobs, homes abandoned, a river and air polluted, and land rendered useless, and some of our people dying of lung disease. I also watched the same companies move their operations to Eastern Europe, Central, and South America, Mr. Chairman, and they never looked back on what they left us to clean up. I hold that memory close. My father grew up on the east side of Youngstown in Mahoning County and moved to Trumbull County to become a Trumbull County Commissioner over 40 years ago. The bridge connecting Mahoning County to Trumbull County, named after my father, overlooks the D&L Energy Company, the site of the epicenter of the earthquakes. I'm sorry if some in the industry and in government find me skeptical, but history does have a way of repeating itself. Since I represent this area and have for the last 25 years, I find it my responsibility to make sure that another industry does not come in, rip the natural resources from our midst, give us more poisoned water, allow methane and radiation to leak from their wells, increasing air pollution, bringing toxic chemicals from out of state to shoot into our earth, rip landowners off cheap, then sell to the highest bidder, all the while promising more jobs than they can actually provide, and then leave us. Sorry, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, I've been around long enough to know that we're not going to be suckers without getting it right, making sure we get our fair share, not destroying our environment and holding the energy companies liable for any damages they do to our valley. Mr. Chairman, last month we were told by ODNR and the state that the injection wells were not causing the earthquakes. That causation was being examined. This week, through an investigation by the Youngstown Vindicator, we find that other seismic activity in other parts of the state in areas that have injection wells have, in fact, caused earthquakes. Mr. Chairman, I hope this committee will find out why ODNR comes so late with the truth. We have two bills in this committee, Mr. Chairman, and that have languished well over 2 months without any hearings, even after our earthquake, and other members of this committee have asked for immediate hearings. And so, Mr. Chairman, I ask that those hearings be held as quickly as possible. This is a serious issue facing every one of us here in the Mahoning Valley. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I've offered a moratorium bill that will stop and pause this frantic leap to the gold rush of the 21st century until we find out how to do this safely, protect our environment, protect our citizens, and have total transparency from our government. I hope this is the beginning of a serious study of this important issue, and I look forward to further testimony. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much again for coming to the Mahoning Valley. Again, I look forward to getting to the truth and making sure that we're doing this in a safe, environmentally safe way. Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you, Representative Hagan. And I think it should be each one of us should do an introduction and say a few comments if you would like. Senator Caparo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the members of the House and Senate committees that have traveled far and wide to come to our community to discuss and hear about the issues that are certainly on the minds of everyone that I represent in Trumbull and Ashtabula County, and certainly those across the Mahoning Valley. I have been representing Trumbull and Ashtabula for the last 5 years, and am just really looking forward to the opportunity to ask some, I think, very important questions to those that are coming here today. I was one of 9 members of the Senate that voted against Senate Bill 165, which was the oil and gas law update, for those of you who may not be familiar with the bill number. And part of the reason why I was in opposition to that bill, not because I believe that we should not be taking full advantage of the economic opportunities that come with the oil and gas potential here in our community, but because I believe that local control is extraordinarily important, that we should have the ability, particularly as a home rule state, to have some jurisdiction by our local political subdivisions, to have oversight and have some self-determination. So I continue to explore this issue, continue to listen to the people that I work for in the 32nd Senate District, and am in the process of putting together a bill that would address some of these issues pertaining to local control, groundwater contamination, increased setbacks, oversight, and the like. We need to be able to have balance. We do want to take advantage of the economic opportunities, but we need to do it in an effective, efficient, and safe manner to protect our communities, our water sources, certainly our properties. And we also need to make sure, frankly, that our local areas, our local workers, our local property owners are actually being able to reap the benefits of the economic possibilities related to oil and gas, and that's something else that I'm looking at. How can we better protect our landowners that have the mineral rights? Can we use the Consumer Sales Practice Act to protect those individuals to make sure they don't get ripped off? These are things, and can we and how can we enhance workforce development and provide some incentives to make sure that Ohioans are doing this work, not shipping in people from Oklahoma and Texas to take our natural resources and not have us reap an economic benefit where we are taking on significant risks, significant economic risks on behalf of our local political subdivisions, significant environmental risks, and certainly if we're going to take those risks and bear that burden, then we should certainly have the opportunity to reap the reward. So I look forward to hearing from those who are participating today. I look forward to posing those questions, and I look forward to sharing with each and every one of you the legislation as we go forward to put something together and bring it to the public for some comments. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm not a member of this committee, as I serve as minority leader in the Senate. I don't get to serve on any committees, but as a member of the delegation here, I am very thankful to both Chairman Hall and Chairman Height to allow me to participate in this hearing today. Thank you.
I'm Senator Cliff Height from Findlay, Ohio. I have 10 counties in the northwest area of the state, and I'm here as chairman of Ag in the Senate Ag Environment and Natural Resources because I want to glean as much information as I can if and when hearings will exist in the future on this subject. I just spent a weekend in Washington, D.C. for an Ag Rural Leadership Conference, and a lot of people are watching what we're doing here, and they're very interested and how we're going to handle this situation and others down the road. And I'm looking forward to the testimony. As a side note, I have not been, Representative Hagan, I have not been back to Youngstown State since Bill Narduzzi was the head football coach, who was the defensive coordinator at Kentucky when I played football there. And I used to babysit his kids, who's now Patrick's the defensive coordinator at Michigan State. So I'm getting old, is what I want you to know. But it's good to get back here. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Joe Schiavone, represent Mahoning County in the State Senate, ranking member on the Energy Committee. I want to thank all of you for coming today. We're all a team here, and this is in our backyard, and so we have to make sure that we're doing this properly. And that's why it's important when we have experts, scientific experts that don't have any feeling one way or another on this whole issue. They're coming here to testify about the science of it. And I think that that's the important part, is listening to the science and using the science as the fact of which way we're going to go, and determining how we're going to proceed with this based on their knowledge and based on other scientists' knowledge, because that's the only thing that we can rely on in this situation. Now, as for I'm trying to schedule as many meetings as possible, not only for you to listen, but for me to listen and for me to learn as well. And that's kind of where we're at. We have to look at the inspections. We have to look at permitting. We have to look at the depths of these wells as indications of which way we're going to go with this and how we're going to proceed, because all of your safety is of utmost concern. If you don't have your safety, you don't have anything. And so you use that as a starting gauge and go throughout, and that's what I'm excited about learning more and more today. So I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you all for coming.
Representative Gentile, you want to introduce yourself? Senator Gentile. Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and I apologize for being late. Mr. Chairman, it's good to be with you all. Thank you all for attending. This is a very important issue we're facing, certainly how to balance economic growth and development with the health and safety and well-being of the public. And certainly am concerned about trying to manage both. One of the things that Senator Schiavone and I have done recently is called for increased funding or restoration of funding to the Division of Geological Survey recently last week in a tour that we had. That division is charged with monitoring the funding, or monitoring rather the earthquakes and seismic activity in the area. And so one thing we have to try to understand is going forward, I think particularly during the permitting process, is trying to determine if there's areas where there's potential seismic activity could occur. And if in fact we can try to determine that on the front end, perhaps we look at other alternatives for deep well injection in different parts of the state that maybe not have had a history of seismic activity or potential seismic activity could occur. So that's something we need to look at very closely. I'm committed to working across the aisle with my colleagues in the House and the Senate and trying to make sure that we take into consideration the health and the well-being of the public and the safety. So thank you. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today.
Thank you. Representative Letson, do you have any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the ability to come here and to listen to the experts and to find out just exactly what the science has to offer, what facts we have to work with as opposed to emotion. After all, it's easy to whip up emotions, but our decisions should be based on fact and science. I'd like to just say thank you to State Representative Matt Huffman today for canceling State Government and Elections Committee that was to be held this afternoon so that Representative Gerberry and I could participate in this particular forum. I would also like to reiterate that I believe we made real progress in Bill 165 in the last General Assembly, and that we improved the way things were done in the state of Ohio. It was not a perfect solution, but we did make vast improvements in the way that we set back and the way that we reclaim and the way that we process gas and oil wells. But what I want to focus on is transparency. And the transparency for me is what goes into the frac fluid. And I don't have a problem with things being trade secrets or proprietary. But what I have a problem with is if there is a problem, I want to have trained, knowledge-based responders that are able to come and assist in whatever problems may happen. We need to, and the problems may well not be at the wellhead. They may be on the road. They may be in transport. They may be in processing. So I believe that the problems will not stem from where it is extracted, but somewhere down the chain, bad things can happen even in good situations. We see that today because even the most casual, even the safest of activities, like taking a ride on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean, has become fraught with danger. And it's a very real set of circumstances that we need to be able to prepare for. We need to have adequately trained, adequately staffed responders that can help us maintain the safe environment that we currently live in. And I thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to be here today and take part in this hearing.
Thank you. Casey Kozlowski, State Representative. I represent the 99th House District, which includes Ashtabula and Northern Trumbull County. Certainly a pleasure to be here today. I look forward to the testimony. I will also say I serve on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, so this is an issue I'm following very closely, and it brings a lot of potential, especially here to Northeast Ohio. And there could be many benefits, but we have to also ensure that we do it in a safe and effective manner. So I look forward to the testimony here today and getting some of the questions answered, and then also continuing this discussion as we move through this development throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jack Sear. I'm from the 95th House District, Jefferson and Belmont counties. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm recently appointed, even though I served in the legislature previously. Our area of Jefferson and Belmont County is going to be an active area with the drilling, so I'm very interested in learning more about the whole process, and would reiterate the comments made by the fellow legislators, trying to find ways to make sure the industry can grow, and we also protect our residents. So thank you very much for having me.
Representative Clyde.
And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Al Landis. I'm from Dover, and I serve the 96th House District, which includes all of Harrison County and parts of Belmont and Tuscarawas County. And I'm here today representing our district, trying to glean as much expert information as the shale play comes to our area. It's very big and very important to the entire state and to the economy, and most importantly, this is about people. So again, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gerberry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Bob Hagan and I have served in the legislature together many, many years. I think this is the first time that I'm seated to the left of him. Being the only, I believe that out of all the legislators here, I welcome all of you, and I'm very proud to welcome you to Youngstown State, being that I believe I'm the only YSU graduate that is a member of the General Assembly, and I'm very, very honored to have all of you here. I wish the weather were nicer so you could see our beautiful campus a little better, but we welcome you all, and in particular Senator Height and also Chairman Hall. And I'm looking forward to the testimony. This is very serious business, and I believe that the meetings that we've held have been constructive, informative, and I'm very hopeful that it will move the ball down the court and that we can get some things accomplished in order to protect not only the industry, but also protect our environment and create jobs so we can have a better economy across our state. So I thank you once again for everyone being here, and I will direct the microphone, if you don't mind, Chairman, over to Representative Fetter.
Well, good morning. I'm so glad to see so many people who actually we've seen many times at the State House. We've heard through email, newspapers. We are really interested in knowing what's going on here, and I want to commend the chairman of the Agricultural Committee and myself, really appreciative of his interest in really getting down to what's happening here as ranking member on the Agricultural Committee in the House. We've been working on this issue for a long time in the state of Ohio, even through the budget. We are now drilling in the state parks in the state of Ohio. I want to make a comment that I really believe we've got the cart before the horse. And the main reason I say that is because the U.S. EPA report doing the study on this new unconventional drilling. And we must determine, whether we're going to use conventional drilling or unconventional drilling as our framework and definition. The U.S. EPA report is not due out till 2012. The complete report by the scientists and interested parties doing this research for us in the United States is not due out until 2014. So I have a question, basically, in all of these scientific experts. Do we really know what's going on if we don't have the complete report done this year yet? And I also have a bill. So we really need to really take a look at what kinds of questions we're asking here. Not the kinds of questions that make us feel comfortable that we're doing the right thing. And I do have a bill in the State House, House Bill 351, that's a transparency and accountability hydrofracking bill. And this will allow us to take a look at what the cocktail chemicals are that they use when they're drilling. And I understand proprietorship, I understand those kinds of issues, but we deal with proprietorship issues in the state of Ohio with businesses. And we have to make that paramount as far as safety. I believe we can address those issues. We don't know how those chemicals interact with the deep shale chemicals in our earth. And the scientists need to know what those chemicals are to do the scientific method of determining how that reacts in our earth, how it would react to, coal drilling next to the new unconventional hydrofracking drilling. And right now in the state of Ohio, I think they have to be 50 feet apart. So House Bill 165 updated our drilling issues and regulations in the state of Ohio, but not when you overlay the new unconventional drilling method and the research that needs to be done yet, and how it will impact the earth's surface, the water surface, and the number one goal of public safety and health and environment. So I thank you for continuing to show your interest. When it's in your own backyard, you pay attention. So you're doing the right thing and getting us all here, and we're not afraid of the facts. We really want to do our job, and I commend everyone that's here. This is really not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is a public safety issue, an environmental issue, and one where we want to have our future generations living in a healthy environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sean O'Brien, and I represent part of Trumbull County, and the other half is Representative Letson. I'd like to thank, first of all of you for being here today. This is such an important issue. As Representative Fetter just said, this is in our backyard, and the world's watching. I'd like to thank my colleagues who traveled far, and it's very important to note that there's Republicans and Democrats here. This isn't a us or them issue. This is a state issue. It's an issue that needs addressed and affects all of us. So I appreciate everyone being here. I would like to thank YSU and their staff and their support for allowing us to have this venue. They've been very helpful, and thank you. I'd like to thank all the witnesses who are going to testify. And I'd like to thank Chairman Hall. Since December 31st, I've seen like I'm attached to a phone, and part of the people I've been talking to is Chairman Hall. He helped put this together, and he understands how important this issue is, not just to us, but to the state, and even to our national security when you think about the energy needs. I'd like to thank his aide, Mike McGuire, as well as my aide, Emily Barker, because they really helped put this together and put so much time into it. You know, as we sit here and we're going to take testimony, it's important to understand every industry has inherent risks. The question is, are the risks outdo the gain that we're about to see? Right now we are on there's a lot of economic development that could be here, and there's a lot of potential. We recognize that. But we must do it right, and that's the most important thing. We need to have the scientific facts and understanding on what is going on and how to go forward. And I think that's important and why we're having these hearings here today, so we can be better educated to understand what is going on. And then we can take this understanding and make the appropriate legislation. And I want to thank again Chairman Hall for being part of this and making this happen. So thank you.
I am Dave Hall. I represent the Holmes, Ashland, Medina County area. I am chairman of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee in the House side. And I just wanted to say that, before we go forward, it was nice to have Youngstown State University have me over here 4 weeks ago today and had a nice tour of the area and with the business community, and also a tour of their geology department. So no stranger to the valley, and I look forward to the expert testimony. Just want to make sure in the framework of this hearing, we're discussing injection wells. And when we're discussing is the issue on injection wells and seismic activity. So when we're looking at this as representatives and senators on committee, we focus on why we're here on the injection well and the issues we're hearing and getting the information from the experts here. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's an honor to have so many distinguished members up here with us, and we're looking forward to the testimony. So I'll call the first witness, and I would like to call up Tom Stewart, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Hall, Representative O'Brien, Chairman Height, it's good to see you, sir. Leader Cafaro, and it's great to have Jack Serra back into the General Assembly. Welcome back. And members of this special committee hearing, good morning. I am Tom Stewart. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Ohio Oil and Gas Association. which is a state-based trade association representing the common interest of over 1,900 members who are engaged in the exploration and production of crude oil and natural gas within the state of Ohio. We've represented this industry since 1947. Today's hearing is focused on the underground injection control program authorized under the landmark federal law, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the UIC relationship to seismic activity, and the development of the resource shale play. I will direct my comments to the regulatory approaches that govern the development of reliable and efficient energy, as well as the economic engine, the jobs that are being realized from development of this resource. My comments will focus on how these events are impacting Ohio, the relationship between federal and state-based regulatory policy, and the process that validates the long-standing principle that the states are best suited to regulate the industry in order to protect the public interest and ensure protection of human health, safety, and the environment. Some background on here in Ohio. For over a century and a half, Ohio has been blessed with a production of plentiful oil and natural gas resources. At each critical point in our history, it has been changes wrought by technology that have provided to the producers the ability to explore new horizons and expand the resource base. Today, the ability to horizontally drill a deep underground reservoir with exacting precision, exponentially exposing the face of the reservoir rock to the wellbore, has created massive efficiencies in our ability to produce oil and gas. Horizontal drilling has been a process that's been around for about 20 years and has been deployed now in many of the basins across the United States. Ohio is now beginning a new era of oil and gas exploration made possible by technology that is unlocking reservoirs that until now were not accessible. For our entire history, we explored for oil and gas from reservoirs where it had been trapped after migrating over the eons from source rocks where oil and gas had been formed and cooked in nature's kitchen. Now we are drilling into the actual source rocks where most geologists believe 95% of the oil and gas still remains in place even after feeding the traps that have produced all the oil and gas that we have found to date. This is a radical departure in America's understanding of energy dependency and the availability of reliable and efficient energies. Even so, we have been drilling Devonian shale wells for well over 100 years in the state of Ohio. The resource shale play will reset the clock on available domestic oil and natural gas resources. Some comments on the economic impact. Already, shale production has fundamentally changed domestic energy markets. Today, the industry is providing the American consumer an incredible energy bargain, providing natural gas priced at 22% of its intrinsic energy value, a trend that the marketplace indicates will continue into the future. It's also enticing the chemical industry to re-enter the United States and build new chemical manufacturing facilities because they will have access to super competitive and plentiful feedstock, jump-starting job growth downstream of the wellhead. What does this mean for Ohio? Since 1860, Ohio has produced over 8.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 1.14 billion barrels of crude oil. The state's geologists recently provided a volumetric calculation to estimate the recoverable reserve potential of the Utica Shale, Ohio's shale opportunity. He reported that should producers extract 5% of the oil and gas in place, leaving 95% of the resource in the rock, the Utica could generate 15.7 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 5.5 billion barrels of crude oil. That is an astonishing number and perhaps a once-in-a-life opportunity for Ohio. An economic impact study commissioned by the Ohio Oil and Gas Energy Education Program determined that the Utica Shale will lead to the creation of over 200,000 Ohio-based jobs over the next 5 years to support the leasing, development, production, and pipeline construction. Investments by oil and gas companies will reach $34 billion to fund development, activity, and infrastructure. Producing wells are projected to generate $1.6 billion of royalty income to Ohio landowners and increase tax revenues of $478 million. Perhaps most significantly, the Utica Shale can make Ohio a net exporter of energy, providing locally produced and low-cost energy supplies to Ohio industry for decades. Coupled with the readily available and affordable energy resource, the expansion of job growth suggests that development of the Utica Shale may be the most significant positive economic event to take place in Ohio for decades. The principal regulatory authority managing the environmental risk associated with oil and natural gas production are state agencies acting under state law or as the delegated regulator under federal law. To put the regulatory process in context, it is useful to understand some key elements of developing a well and generating production. Except on federally owned resources, the regulatory responsibility rests with the state oil and gas agencies for permitting well construction and completion. These agencies set the standard that must be met in drilling a well, such as location limits, construction standards, including steel casing and cementing requirements, and surface management requirements. Well construction requirements are particularly significant because they are the principal methods of protecting against groundwater contamination. By creating a barrier between the groundwater and the wellbore, oil and other chemicals from the well cannot move into water formations, and water cannot move into the wellbore. This technological approach has been used effectively for 75 years and is continually improved. Well completion regulations determine the management of technologies to stimulate production from oil and natural gas containing formations. Hydraulic fracturing is a well stimulation technology. Consequently, since its invention in the late 1940s, its use has been regulated by state oil and natural gas agencies. Throughout the past 6 decades, this regulatory structure has effectively protected against the environmental risk of fracturing without the involvement or intervention of the federal government. Proposals that the federal government needs to insert itself into well construction and completion regulations fail to show that any justification exists, suggesting a failure of the current state regulatory process or that federal government has either the expertise or the capacity to regulate 35,000 or more wells that are drilled annually in the United States. In fact, where the federal government does have regulatory authority related to oil and natural gas production, it relies on the state regulators to conduct the daily regulatory effort. Federal environmental laws apply to oil and natural gas production activities when waste is generated. Most specifically, with regard to the development of emerging shale gas and shale oil formations, the applicable federal law addresses the disposal of produced waters, including frac flowback water, under the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. The applicability of the law depends on the disposition of the produced water. Produced water injected underground is regulated under Safe Drinking Water Act. Produced water discharged to the surface is regulated under the Clean Water Act. The Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act operate similarly. The federal government creates a national framework, but the laws rely on state regulators to bear the larger permitting burden through the delegation of that role from the Environmental Protection Agency. With respect to Safe Drinking Water Act, regulation of underground injection is defined by the Underground Injection Control Program. The UICIE program creates a series of classes for different types of injection wells. Class 2 applies to oil and natural gas production. In 1980, Congress modified Safe Drinking Water Act to allow for primacy under the law to be granted to states for Class 2 programs based on equivalent effectiveness rather than adoption of the specific EPA regulations. Most oil and natural gas producing states with active underground injection operations have primacy based on equivalency with or more stringent than the federal program. Class 2 wells can either be used for disposition of water or for reinjection in formations as a type of secondary recovery to increase production. Only water produced from oil and gas wells can be injected in Class 2 wells, nothing else. And if something was, that would be a violation of Safe Drinking Water Act and the Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. According to EPA, the use of injection wells was documented as early as 300 AD, and large-scale commercial use of injection wells in the United States began in the 1930s. The oil and gas industry isn't the only industry that has used injection wells as a safe and well-regulated disposal means. Other industrial sectors that rely on injection wells include chemicals, manufacturing, food and agriculture, plastics, metal, and steel. Ohio is home to 10 so-called Class 1 wells that accept concentrated high-toxicity waste generated by industrial processes. Ohio hosts 58 Class 3 disposal wells that accepts fluids used to dissolve and extract minerals such as uranium, salt, copper, and sulfur. Today, there are over 144,000 Class 2 wells in operation within the United States. On average, those wells accept more than 2 billion gallons of water per day that is associated with oil and natural gas development. Clearly, without the delegation of this program to state regulatory bodies, the federal law would be virtually incapable of implementation. In 1983, U.S. EPA delegated primacy authority to Ohio to run the UIC program. As the host of the oil and gas regulatory program, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources received the authority to manage the Class II program. Under the primacy agreement, the ODNR issues U.S. UIC permits for Class II wells, but U.S. EPA sets the standard for construction, maintenance, and continuous monitoring of the Class II wells. The Ohio UIC program is regularly audited by U.S. EPA and has undergone peer reviews conducted by the Groundwater Protection Council. In December 1984, the Ohio General Assembly, the 115th, enacted Substitute House Bill 501 that set in place standards for the storage and disposal of brines, called at that time, formation saltwater or produced waters from oil and gas production wells. According to federal standards, produced waters are the combination of formation water and water that has been injected into the formation either for well stimulation purposes or secondary recovery processes. Produced water is generally ubiquitous in character, represents a low toxicity but high volume waste stream, and therefore is not classified as a hazardous waste under the Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. State Representative Robert E. Hagan was the lead sponsor of House Bill 501, which served as the Assembly's response to an authentic environmental problem. Up until then, produced waters were often captured and stored in evaporation pits. This practice led to widespread pollution of drinking water resources. House Bill 501 banned the use of evaporation pits, and justifiably so. It then required that all oil and gas related produced waters be disposed of using the best and most preferred method under the landmark federal laws. Class II injection that permanently impounds the waste stream back into the same formation it came from or deeper. Interesting enough, HB 501 at introduction contemplated a moratorium on oil and gas wells until the state of Ohio could actually certify that a sufficient number of UIC wells existed to manage the brine that was being then produced. 501 also set registration and reporting requirements for brine haulers. HB 501 led to large-scale cleanup of damage caused by oil field practices that existed at that time and was a much-needed environmental improvement. Except for a minor amount used by local governments for dust and ice control, it is the law of the state of Ohio that all oil and gas-related produced water must be disposed of using a Class II UIC well constructed to the federal standards. Since that time, the industry has built up a network of Class II wells along the breadth of eastern Ohio to service the needs of oil and gas producers who must comply with Ohio law. Currently, there are 181 Class II injection wells operating in Ohio, or 0.12% of the nation's total population of such wells. The Ohio wells accept about 1.303 million gallons of produced waters per day, or less than 0.05% of the total nationwide volume. It is important to put the recent events in Mahoning County into context with the wider use and track record of Class II wells existing in Ohio. Lately in Mahoning County, there's been a series of localized seismicity that, after reasonable analysis, has generated concern that may be related to a recently installed UIC Class II well. We accept that these are rational concerns. The well in question is a deep injection well for which the total depth penetrates into the granite basement rock lying below the deepest sedimentary rock known as the Mount Simon Sandstone, a formation with sufficient porosity and permeability to serve as an effective disposal reservoir. Many Class I and Class II wells target the Mount Simon Formation. We acknowledge that the concerns may be related to as a yet-to-be-determined geologic anomaly, likely a minor slip-strike fault, which is two blocks moving against each other in opposite directions, lying within the crystalline basement rock. According to experts, in order for the injectate to cause a seismic event, a fault must already exist that has existing stress on it to the point that it is already near failure. The injectate alleviates pore pressure to, in effect, lubricate the already near failure fault and cause it to slip. Earthquakes are the abrupt movement of sections of the earth that release vibrational energy. They are the result of plate tectonics and the fact that the crust of the earth is composed of pieces that move, bump, and generally cause stress upon one another. One way that the rock of these plates responds to stress is by cracking, faulting. These plates are everywhere, and earthquakes can happen anywhere. This is nature. Earthquakes are measured on the Richter scale, a logarithmic scale that means each measurement is 10 times greater than the measurement preceding it. Large earthquakes are rare but can cause massive damage. Small earthquakes are continuous but release insignificant energy. Quakes in the 4.0 to 4.9 range are considered light and occur somewhere nearly once an hour. Quakes in the range of 3.0 to 3.9 are considered minor and occur somewhere 15 times per hour. Quakes in the range of 2.0 to 2.9 are also minor and occur 2 per minute, and those less than 2.0 occur continually. Roughly 1.3 million 2 to 2.9 magnitude quakes happen every year around the world. The majority of quakes associated with the Mahoning County were in the 2.0 to 2.9 range. Experts say that several of them were not felt at the surface. Having said that, I do not minimize the concern Mahoning County citizens have with this event. I would no more want my home in Fairfield County, home of the Discovery Well in the Clinton Sand, shaking any more than they do. That's why we supported the Kasich administration's decision to temporarily suspend operations at this well and other projects within a radius of this well. It was the correct and prudent course of action to ensure the safety and peace of mind of area residents. This is evidence of an effective regulatory agency. We also believe the situation in Youngstown is a rare and isolated event that should not cast doubt about the effectiveness or usage of Class II injection wells, which have been used safely and reliably as a disposal method for wastewater from oil and gas operations in the United States since the 1930s, and is the preferred method for oil field waste management under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Even so, there have been some statements made that serve only to confuse the situation and are designed to create fear and uncertainty with the oil and gas development process. Opponents of the oil and gas development have been quick and insistent to claim that the Mahoning County UIC well is related to hydraulic fracturing. The North Star UIC well was not hydraulically fractured. It is not a producing facility. The event is not related to the process of hydraulic fracturing. People who say otherwise are working to create fear using a broadly spoken term for a process that, to this day, the public has scant fundamental knowledge, even though it has been used in the oil field over 1.2 million times, and in Ohio 80,000 times over a 60-year time frame. The North Star UIC well was constructed and operating in full compliance with the permit conditions. A geologic anomaly is at the root of this problem, not the well. We need experts to fully understand the specific problem, learn from it, and then adjust regulatory policy accordingly to avoid future problems. Opponents of oil and gas development have, in this case and elsewhere, stated that the industry is exempt from federal regulation. Again, this is an attempt to politicize the process. In regard to this, recall that the Safe Drinking Water Act sets standards for public water supplies, including establishment of the Underground Injection Control Program, a process that has the specific purpose to permanently dispose by impoundment of a waste in an appropriate underground reservoir. Hydraulic fracturing is a well completion procedure designed to induce permeability in a low-perm oil and gas reservoir by creating a fracture, a pathway through the targeted reservoir rock to more readily allow the oil and gas to move through the reservoir and into the wellbore to then be lifted to the surface. With few exceptions, it is a one-time procedure. It is never an ongoing procedure like Class 1 or Class 2 injection. It is not the disposal of a waste stream. In fact, it is done to make a well capable of production in order to efficiently withdraw in commercial quantities product from the rock, including the water that was used during the frac job. There have been anti-oil and gas organizations that have attempted to construct an argument that fracturing is the same thing as Class 2 injection of produced waters and should be regulated as such under Safe Drinking Water Act. That argument is an attempt to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it fails by virtue of the various definitions of the processes being discussed. Congress never had the intention of regulating a well stimulation process under Safe Drinking Water Act as a waste disposal process. In 2005, Congress clarified that view by simply stating in the 2005 Energy Policy Act that hydraulic fracturing, or storage gas injection for that matter, is not underground injection. Congress did not exempt the industry from Safe Drinking Water Act as others claim. In fact, industry's produced water waste streams are specifically regulated as Class II injection and fully covered under Safe Drinking Water Act. There is no loophole. The language is definitional and straightforward. Nowhere does it say that the oil and gas industry and its activities that are relevant to the Act are exempted from Safe Drinking Water Act regulation. Some people are making allegations that radioactive waste are being injected into the ground. The radioactive waste referenced are not what they would lead you to believe. NORM, or naturally occurring radioactive material, is part of everyday life. It even occurs in our bodies with radioactive potassium. You can find it in public drinking water, Brazil nuts, peanut butter, or the air. If you have a granite kitchen tabletop, you have a NORM issue. On average, Americans receive a radiation dose of about 0.62 rem each year. But if you're unfortunate enough to have dentures, they can add another 1,600 milliram to a person's exposure level. None of these levels are dangerous to human health. A radiological survey report by the Cophysics Corporation in New York recently concluded the rock cuttings from the gas drilling operations as sampled during this project have radionuclide levels that do not pose any environmental health problem, even if they were deposited in areas accessible to the general public. Therefore, they are certainly acceptable for landfill disposal. The New York State Department Environmental Conservation study titled Supplemental Generic Environmental Impact Statement on the Oil and Gas and Solution Mining Regulatory Program that was completed in September of last year stated that based upon current available information, it is anticipated that flowback water would not contain levels of NORM of significance. The Ohio Department of Health has actually tested produced waters and cuttings to determine if the levels of NORM are dangerous to human health. All the produced water and cuttings tested fell below levels harmful to human health. There is no concern in regards to radiation from the disposal of produced waters or cuttings. Much concern has been voiced regarding the volume of produced waters from other states that's being injected into Ohio UIC wells. And in fact, the volume from such sources is notably increasing. First, let me say that the OGA is first in line expressing concerns that out-of-state brine volumes may stress the capacity of UIC wells to manage the produced waters from existing Ohio oil and gas wells. We believe that other states should work to develop solutions within their own states to manage issues related to their own industries. Ohio, just like other states, must accept produced water from other states because of the Dormant Commerce Clause, which is part of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the United States Constitution. The Dormant Commerce Clause prohibits the state from passing legislation that improperly burdens or discriminates against interstate commerce. The best example of the Dormant Commerce Clause goes back to Philadelphia versus New Jersey, in which the Supreme Court ordered New Jersey to accept waste, liquid or solid, from other states. This is not a state issue. We are federally obligated to accept waste from other states, be it solid waste like trash or liquid waste like produced waters. The operation of oil and natural gas wells have been regulated since the 1920s with an increasing emphasis on environmental controls since the 1960s. This regulation has been and continues to be done effectively by the states, a reality that has been recognized by the Congress and by the EPA. Because of the diversity of conditions associated with oil and natural gas production, the regulatory process must be flexible and reflect the unique conditions in a state or area within a state. It requires the technical expertise that has been developed in each state and which does not exist within the EPA. For this reason, federal law is generally deferred to the states for the regulation of this industry. The Groundwater Protection Council is an organization of state groundwater regulatory agencies which comes together to mutually work toward the protection of the nation's groundwater supplies. The purpose of GWPC is to promote and ensure the use of best management practices and fair but effective laws regarding comprehensive groundwater protection. In August of 2011, Groundwater Protection Council issued a report that investigated the regulatory history of Texas and Ohio as it relates to oil and natural gas production and protection of groundwater resources. The report conclusively demonstrates that the state regulatory agencies within these states, both significant oil and gas producing states, have prioritized regulatory reforms and strategically applied resources to improve standards that reduce risk associated with state-specific compliance issues. Over time, both Ohio and Texas have strategically enhanced regulatory standards for state-specific oil and gas E&P activities that have been found to cause groundwater contamination incidents. In other words, the states have made consistent ongoing improvements to protect the environment and the public interest that is tailored to each individual state's characteristics and needs. Also, over time, the states have engaged in a process that corroborates their regulatory abilities, identifies regulatory gaps, and provides a process to close those gaps and improve their respective regulatory programs. The State Review of Oil and Natural Gas Environmental Regulations, known as STRONGER, is an independent stakeholder governing body that manages the state review process. The overall objective of the state review process is to help state oil and gas regulatory programs improve. The key innovative aspect of the state review process are that teams made up of equal representation from the environmental community, state regulators, and industry come together to conduct an authentic peer review critique of the state's regulatory program, benchmarking the program against a national set of guidelines that itemize the critical elements necessary to protect the public interest in the environment. This process represents a stakeholder-driven collaborative effort working together to develop a regulatory framework at the state level that effectively protects the environment while recognizing the unique historic, geologic, and topographic characteristics of oil and gas development among the states. Stronger recently updated the review of guidelines to include a specific section focused on hydraulic fracturing. Over the past year, Stronger has done fact-specific reviews in 6 states and Ohio following the implementation of the new law, Senate Bill 165. Stronger conducted a state review specific to hydraulic fracturing in Ohio. The review concluded that the Ohio program was overall well-managed, professional, and meeting its program objectives. And that report was signed off on by the environmental community. The Secretary of Energy Advisory Board's Shale Gas Production Subcommittee interim report and the recent National Petroleum Report on shale gas have specifically commended the state review process. The state review process demonstrates that the states are the best and most efficient point to regulate the industry's waste streams. The process provides for a system of constant improvement and an opportunity to share and promote new or unique regulatory concepts among the states while maintaining the flexibility needed to meet individual states' needs. Injection of produced water deep underground into formations that already contain formation water using wells regulated to federal standards has proven to be safe, effective, and a preferred means for protecting the environment. When such activity interacts with the deep geological anomaly to cause the exceedingly rare events we have witnessed recently in Ohio, then regulatory experts need to take action to correct the specific situation. That has happened. Unfortunately, some of the people speaking with the loudest voices right now in opposition to UIC wells appear to be people with the least awareness of the history of facts associated with the UIC program as it exists in Ohio, or have the least willingness to provide a balanced perspective to the facts. We respect the administration's decision to suspend operations in the impacted area until more facts come to light. Our industry is committed to ensuring that this matter is resolved in a proper manner with facts and not hyperbole, informing any decisions that will be made in the future. That concludes my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I appreciate your testimony. We'll have questions from the panel. Ma'am, we have questions for the panel. Representative O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I have a question. In Ohio right now we have, it's my understanding, 177 injection wells operating today as we speak. Is that correct?
My last count was 181, Representative, but you'll probably see it on the official site, 177.
Okay. And the concern is we have a well, in Ohio we have earthquakes, but we only have about 4 or 5 a year, is my understanding. Since this well in Youngstown was brought online within a year, we have over 11 earthquakes, with one being at a 4.0 on the Richter scale. With 11 earthquakes happening within a year, within the epicenter being close to that well, is there something that this well is doing different? Is it deeper than most wells? What is the problem as you see it?
Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Brien, Dave Hill is with me. He is an operator of several UIC wells across the state of Ohio, and I'll ask him to jump in any time to answer those kinds of technical questions. Anytime you wish, Dave. But the answer to your question is that this well was drilled down to the basement rock. It could go no further and find sedimentary rock, but it's often common to drill down and through the Mount Simon in order to find the best injectate zone. You want to add to that, Dave?
The only other thing Chairman, it's David Hill. The only thing I would add to that is the Mount Simon sandstone is used quite common in Ohio for injection zones. Also, Class 1 injection wells use the Mount Simon sandstone.
But in the follow-up, the fact is that this well TD'd at about 9,200 feet. It is several hundred feet into the basement rock, and could they interacted with some kind of minor fault system? I think that's very plausible.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. To the witness, is there any seismic drilling or testing done before we stimulate these wells to determine whether or not there's a fault line or if there's any irregularity? I mean, is this systematic to every injection well? We have 177 or 181, whatever the number is, but we're not seeing a problem there. Is this systematic to this one well? Is it the geological formation? And are we testing for that before we begin this process so it doesn't happen again?
Mr. Chairman, I'll let Dave Hill answer that
question. Currently, right now, we are not required to run seismic surveys prior to the permitting process. And as I understand it, there are, and I may stand corrected if someone else has a different, but right now, no states in the United States require seismic surveys prior to the siting of a Class 2 injection well.
Seismic surveys is an exploratory technique to try to find structure, try to find oil and gas traps. It's like a sonogram of a baby, only in this case the baby is Mother Earth.
But that being said, don't you think that if we're looking for a fault line before we drill into one, because that would be a very big concern of ours and our constituents, is check before we drill and do the seismic testing so we know what's down there before we do it, because if we just drill and we don't know what's there, we could have more earthquakes than what we have.
I think that's a rational concern. Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Brien, I think that's a reasonable path to investigate. Often seismic lines are run across UIC wells. But remember, what a seismic survey does, even 3D surveys, is try to map structure. They try to identify structure to find oil and gas traps. I think that it's very plausible that even if you did a 3D survey across this prospect here in Mahoning County, whether you would see this fall, I think is very debatable.
My understanding of a 3D is it wouldn't show it. What would be more appropriate is to actually drill a test line down there and get a sample or do it along that way. My understanding of 3D probably would not have showed up any fault line of what was occurring or may have occurred here in Youngstown.
Seismic testing is done on the surface of the earth. You don't go down into the well to do seismic surveys. It's sound technology on the surface of the earth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead if you
have a comment, Dave?
The only comment I would make to that is a 3D seismic survey can cover a large area. And again, Tom is correct. The surveys are taken on the surface of the earth. We're sending sound waves through, and they're bouncing back, and we get an image. Going to your point about should we drill a physical hole in the ground to see if we encounter that fracture, the chances of actually maybe encountering a fracture are minuscule. And if we're going to look for these things, I think running a seismic survey would be much more advantageous than as opposed to drilling a hole in the ground to looking for it. I think we're more likely to find those features. Again, we're drilling a hole in the ground. We're sampling that particular column. And a seismic survey would cover a larger area.
Yeah, a hole in the ground gives you a sample of what's happening in underground formations in an 8-inch area.
You have to excuse my ignorance. I didn't know a core sample might be more.
It wouldn't show you that, Representative.
I know 3D, I'm talking 3D.
I see where you're going.
3D might not show it as well.
No, core sampling is the process of going down through that 8-inch, generally an 8-inch hole that reaches down to TD. Starts as big as 15, but 8-inch is the length and breadth of the production string of the well. When you core it, you're actually lifting out that 8-inch plug. It's not going to show you the fault. Big seismic surveys, you can go and you look at them, and I have, and you can see some major faults. And we have mapped major faults all around Ohio. In this event, it would be my opinion, sir, that if we wanted to duplicate what happened on the North Star well, we would never get there, because this is a very minor fault system that slipped and was near failure anyways.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To the witnesses, I do have several questions, so I'm just going to go through your testimony and start off. My first question, Mr. Chairman, to the witness is, do you know what the penalty would be for violating the Safe Drinking Water Act at the federal level?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cafaro, it would be severe if you violate the Safe Drinking Water Act, because U.S. EPA would step in. They would also expect the state of Ohio, who has primacy on this specific program, to also enforce the law in the state of Ohio that they have delegated to them. And in Senate Bill 165, there was whole clauses in 165 that dramatically improved the enforcement capabilities of the Oil and Gas Regulatory Agency, giving them the ability to immediately remove the ability of an operator if he is in violation of the law, suspend his ability to do anything, and immediately bring charges against him and get corrective action.
Mr. Chairman, just as a follow-up to that, you said they would be severe. Could you clarify severe? Severe to whom? I would assume it would be severe to the operator. And is there an associated monetary fine associated with that? And how does one determine that level of violation?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cafaro, if the Safe Drinking Water Act were violating the state of Ohio, U.S. EPA would expect the Oil and Gas Regulatory Program, the DNR, to pursue that. After 165, they have the ability to ramp up very, very large fines in the hundreds of thousands of dollars if necessary. I am not sure exactly how that is calculated.
Okay.
For example, the well in Bainbridge,
yeah,
which I think is where you're going, I'm not sure what the fine was, but it was massive.
Mr. Chairman, to the witness, I was actually not going there, but Bainbridge was in 2005, and Senate Bill 165 was passed at the end of 2009. So as far as I'm concerned, they're two separate issues.
But they applied the fines.
It's fine. We'll move on. My next question, Mr. Chairman, is you mentioned that it was explicitly defined that the Class 2 wells are not exempt from federal law. Do you know the section of the U.S. Code that actually explicitly states the definitions of which the Class 2 wells need to adhere to, and where we can locate the fact that this is not a loophole?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cafaro, I knew I should have copied that off. I have it.
Some people really love reading U.S. Code, Mr. Chairman.
It's actually just...
That would be me.
Yeah. Boy, that's bizarre.
I also love C-SPAN.
It's actually just one sentence, and I'll be happy to send it to you.
I would appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. My next question, Mr. Chairman, to the witness is you referenced the fact that the Ohio Department of Health tested the water to identify if the norm levels were dangerous. Can you tell the committee when and where ODH did the norm inspections?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cafaro, you would have to ask the Ohio Department of Natural Resources that. They're the ones that work with the Department of Health to get it done. I believe it's been done over the past year and a half.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we will certainly make sure that
we can chase that too.
That we do that. My next question, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to run through these because I have several. Do you know if federal law differentiates the geographically based diverse geological, do they differentiate based on the diverse geological circumstances? So, when we talked about the groundwater protection and et cetera, does the federal law explicitly determine if there are different rules based on the geological formations that obviously our nation from sea to shining sea is very diverse in that regard?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Gafaro, when they reopened the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act in the 1980s, environmental groups sued U.S. EPA to make them pursue a regulatory determination to determine whether the industry was regulated under the Subtitle C of Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. EPA then conducted a study and it gave a regulatory report to the United States Congress, which the United States Congress adopted when they reauthorized RCRA. The United States Congress, based upon the recommendation from U.S. EPA, determined that each state, because of its geologic, as I mentioned, topographic, geographical, all the different characteristics of both the industry that's operating in that state or the geology that drives that industry or any of the number of factors that differentiates us would drive that regulation down to the state level. And therefore, under RCRA, Subtitle C, which is the hazardous waste clause, said that the oil and gas industry should be regulated at the state level, and that's the best place to do it, so long as the states recognize that there's gaps in regulatory policy and work to improve those gaps. The stronger process that I described to you near the end of my testimony is a 20-year-old process that arose out of the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, the governors of the producing states, to initiate that process, and that's been ongoing since that time. So yes, when they reauthorized RCRA, they adopted the regulatory determination and said, states, you go do it for the very reasons that you mentioned.
And Mr. Chairman, a follow-up to that, does the industry have any opinion or do you have any knowledge of places in Ohio that might be best suited for injection wells because of the geological differentiation between eastern Ohio, for example, and central and southern Ohio?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cafaro, it's up and down eastern Ohio, and you'll find Class 1 and Class 2 wells across nearly two-thirds of the state of Ohio, I would imagine. So what drives that? Where you can find a reservoir that has suitable permeability and porosity characteristics to accept that waste. And in and of itself would not be an oil and gas producer.
Just a few more, Mr. Chairman. I promise, and I unfortunately have to drive to Columbus at noon, so I'm trying to get it all out. Mr. Chairman, would the industry be willing to consider supporting codifying being responsible for paying for infrastructure damage related to activity? Many of our political subdivisions, townships in particular, do not have the resources available for infrastructure repair. And I'm curious to know whether or not the industry would be willing to actually have that codified to be a partner to be responsible for the repair to infrastructure like roads.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Gafaro, the industry right now is currently in negotiations with local government at a table that is being hosted, facilitated by the Department of Transportation, to work out what's called a RUMA agreement, a road use maintenance agreement, a model agreement between industry, primarily the shale industry, and local government on how roads will be maintained going forward. Having said that, if you look at the track record in Pennsylvania and other places where this activity has taken place, the industry has already voluntarily rebuilt infrastructure, rebuilt roads, even built it before the activity took place so they could withstand the weight limits, and have invested hundreds of $millions of dollars to do so. And local government recognizes that. There is a complication with codifying it. When we did House Bill 278 back in 2004, and when we did Senate Bill 165, which primarily preempted to the oil and gas regulatory program the authority over all aspects of oil and gas development, local government came in under the 165 during the House debate, near the end of the House hearings, and said, we want to make sure that our authority delegated under the Ohio statute is not impacted by the preemptive authority underneath 1509.02. And that was put into the bill at the request of municipal and township governments. And it made clear that nothing in 150902 could impact their authority over their roads. So they asked for and had specific instructions under the statute that you cannot confuse regulatory authority between state government over oil and gas operations and with local government over their roads. So that separation of power stands in the statute today at the request of local government. Therefore, you cannot codify in the oil and gas permit the ability to say, have you complied with the instructions from local government?
Well, Mr. Chairman, to the witness, I will certainly take a look at that. It's called the Ohio Revised Code for a reason. And
1509.02.
that certainly seems like it's an area, along with the zoning, that I'm going to have to address. My two final questions, first being, is there a capacity limit for an injection well to take on the brine? And if so, is it set by federal standards, state standards, or industry standard?
Mr. Chairman, there is not a capacity issue. The rules under the Department of Natural Resources tell us what pressures that we have to maintain and stay below. And the volume that can be injected is controlled by geology. It's controlled by the characteristics of the particular rock you're injecting into. But we're very much regulated on the pressure.
Okay.
So otherwise, there will be a point where the formation fills up
right.
with enough water where you would exceed the maximum operating pressure assigned by the regulatory program.
Okay. And finally, Mr. Chairman, to the witness, I was actually I just saw on Vindy.com that the administration and ODNR has created an 8,000-foot limit for brine injection wells. Does the industry have an opinion on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cafaro, I don't know how to respond to that. I guess I'd have to really understand what they said.
Okay.
Thank you. I couldn't read my iPad driving up today. And by the way, Section 1422 of the Federal Code, UIC.
Okay, Section 1422?
1422, Federal Code.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee for indulging my questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before Representative Lutz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank the witness for coming today. I've got a couple questions. One of them has to do with the myths of fracking fluid. We hear that everything from banana peels to diesel fuel to leftover radioactive waste is being used in fracking fluids, and that no one can find out about what its constituent parts are or how to clean it up should it happen to come into contact with the surface or human beings. Can you explain to us